if Carl and Lindsay guaranteed that room block and guests started canceling because the wedding was canceled, they, being Carl and Lindsay, may have had to pay that difference.
All right. Well, this has been an interesting story, and why there's no legal steps yet, maybe there could be. So multiple sources previously told Us Weekly that Carl Radke and Lindsay Hubbard didn't initially reach out to tell their loved ones and inform them that their wedding was called off until just recently. So they were set to get married in Mexico in November, but they broke off their wedding on August 31st, and he did this right in front of Bravo cameras. And a second insider told us that the breakup came as a shock to the wedding guests as well, with a source telling us that only producers knew this was coming. Very few of the guests were informed before the news broke. The deadline to cancel their rooms and receive a refund is over, so many guests were left to eat the cost. So can the wedding guests, if they wanted to, go after the groom production if they knew that the wedding was canceled before they could get a refund, saying like it was maybe allotted within that time?
The answer is yes with respect to Carl and Lindsay, but it's going to be much harder with respect to the production company. And the reason is this: there has to be some sort of legal duty or a contractual relationship for there to be a claim. So the guests can say, well, we were invited by the bride and groom and they defrauded us. Or, we had an agreement and they breached that agreement because they didn't tell us that the wedding was canceled and we suffered damages as a result. That same relationship doesn't exist between the guests and the production company. So I don't think they would have a really good claim to go after the production company directly. But I think with respect to their out-of-pocket costs for the hotel, to the extent that those costs were incurred after Carl and Lindsay knew the wedding was off, I think the guests actually have a decent case there.
Yeah, and there was rumors, we did not confirm this at all, but there were some rumors going around that maybe Carl and Lindsay had a deal with the hotel, and maybe that's why they didn't tell guests before they could get their money back. Is that something that maybe you've heard before, like maybe they were contractually bound to this hotel to have a certain number of guests show up?
I have seen that. So, when there's a wedding, oftentimes the bride and groom will guarantee a room block, which means that they'll get a discounted rate, but they need to fill those hotel rooms. So let's say they guarantee that block, but guests don't show up, or the wedding is canceled, the bride and groom may be on the hook. I'm not saying they, didn't tell their guests to shift the cost onto them, but it's certainly a standard provision that the bride and groom are going to pay for all this because, again, that contract is between the hotel and Carl and Lindsay and not between the hotel and the guest until they make those reservations.
Right. So they could have potentially had to foot the bill of all these rooms that weren't occupied then.
Potentially. If Carl and Lindsay guaranteed that room block and guests started canceling because the wedding was canceled, they, being Carl and Lindsay, may have had to pay that difference.